Miller Loveday was the representative of an ancient family of corn grinders whose history is lost in the mists of antiquity. His ancestral line was contemporaneous with that of de Roos, Howard, and de la Zouche, but owing to some trifling deficiency in the possessions of the House of Loveday, the individual names and intermarriages of its members were not recorded during the Middle Ages, and thus their private lives in any given century were uncertain. But it was known that the family had formed matrimonial alliances with farmers not so very small, and once with a gentleman tanner, who had for many years purchased after their death the horses of the most aristocratic persons in the county, fiery steeds that earlier in their career had been valued at many hundred guineas. It was also ascertained that Mr. Loveday's great-grandparents had been 8 in number, and his great-great-grandparents 16, every one of whom reached to years of discretion. At every stage backwards his sires and gammers thus doubled and doubled, till they became a vast body of Gothic ladies and gentlemen of the rank known as chales or villeins, full of importance to the country at large, and ramifying throughout the unwritten history of England. His immediate father had greatly improved the value of their residence by building a new chimney, and setting up an additional pair of millstones. Overcombe Mill presented at one end the appearance of a hard-worked house slipping into the river, and at the other of an idle, genteel place, half cloaked with creepers at this time of the year, and having no visible connection with flour. It had hips instead of gables, giving it a round-shouldered look, 4 chimneys with no smoke coming out of them, 2 zigzag cracks in the wall, several open windows, with a looking-glass here and there inside, showing its warped back to the passer-by. Snowy dimity curtains waving in the draught, 2 mill doors, one above the other, the upper enabling a person to step out upon nothing at a height of 10 feet from the ground, a gaping arch vomiting the river, and a lean, long-nosed fellow looking out from the mill doorway, who was the hired grinder, except when a bulging 15-stone man occupied the same place, namely the miller himself. Behind the mill door, and invisible to the mere wayfarer who did not visit the family, were chalked addition and subtraction sums, many of them originally done wrong, and the figures half rubbed out and corrected, noughts being turned into 9s and 1s into 2s. These were the miller's private calculations. There were also chalked in the same place rows and rows of strokes, like open palings, representing the calculations of the grinder, who in his youthful ciphering studies had not gone so far as Arabic figures. In the court in front were 2 worn-out millstones, made useful again by being let in level with the ground. Here people stood to smoke and consider things in muddy weather, and cats slept on the clean surfaces when it was hot. In the large stubbard tree at the corner of the garden was erected a pole of larch fir, which the miller had bought with others at a sale of small timber in Damer's Wood one Christmas week. It rose from the upper boughs of the tree to about the height of a fisherman's mast, and on the top was a vane in the form of a sailor with his arms stretched out. When the sun shone upon this figure, it could be seen that the greater part of his countenance was gone, and the paint washed from his body so far as to reveal that he had been a soldier in red before he became a sailor in blue. The image had, in fact, been John, one of our coming characters, and was then turned into Robert, another of them. This revolving piece of statuary could not, however, be relied on as a vane, owing to the neighbouring hill, which formed variable currents in the wind. The leafy and quieter wing of the mill house was the part occupied by Mrs. Garland and her daughter, who made up in summer-time for the narrowness of their quarters by overflowing into the garden on stools and chairs. The parlour or dining room had a stone floor, a fact which the widow sought to disguise by double carpeting, lest the standing of Anne and herself should be lowered in the public eye. Here now the midday meal went lightly and mincingly on, as it does where there is no greedy, carnivorous man to keep the dishes about, and was hanging on the close, when somebody entered the passage as far as the chink of the parlour door and tapped.